Has anyone ever had one of those friends that you really don't like, but at the same time you just wind up finding yourself hanging out with them on nearly a daily basis? Let me elaborate on that phrase. How many of you out there have had to deal with a so-called friend, quote-unquote, of yours that you really have no liking to, find absolutely annoying as all hell, and worst of all, is someone that you really don't even trust or like? I'm sure that we've all went through this at least one point in time in our lives, and if you haven't, then you certainly can be considered lucky and blessed by the gods for that. You see, people like the ones I have mentioned above have genuinely been the downfall of many friendships, with their narcissism, annoyance, and god-awful behavior. I have to admit, I actually had to deal with one of them myself. Honestly, I'm not really 100% sure if I should mention this person's name, given his nature, but so for the sake of saving my hide, I'll simply call him Caden. Now, when it came to Caden, he was one of the reasons why I actually suffer the most with my antisocial anxiety that I have now, and I've lost any kind of trust with people outside of my own small circle group of friends. Caden was a narcissist, in every sense of the word. His way of handling things were extremely poor. He only cared for himself, expected everything to go his way, and when he decided to target me as one of his, quote, friends, my life ultimately went down into a quick spiral down the eternal road of suffering. Not only during our so-called friendship did he hang out with me the most during the majority of high school, but he also guilt-tripped me constantly whenever I particularly called him out on anything, even for the smallest little thing. Of course, nowadays I wouldn't have tolerated that crap and pretty much kicked him to the curb at the very first sign that I saw of him. However, I was a young teen, and I had been harassed and bullied non-stop back at middle school, and having to go and deal with having no friends at the time would have likely been the end of me. So, because of my vulnerability, Caden, when he first targeted me, ultimately became that one quote-unquote friend that I hung out with, and basically had to kiss his ass constantly. I still shudder every time I think about all the abuse that bastard had caused me throughout all my years of high school. And due to his narcissism, I'm never going to forgive him for what he did to me. Sure enough, though, for anybody wondering, there was a time that I finally had had enough of his antics and guilt trips all the time. It's actually kind of funny when I think about it now, because all of this stemmed from a single video and production class that he made, that made me ultimately dump his sorry ass. This is what happened. It was around the last half of my senior year of high school, and I was really getting sick and tired of Caden's crap and was pretty much ready to start filing a restraining order on him after he had beaten me up after school one day for a simple misunderstanding. Well, as I was preparing myself to leave for my last class and then go home, I was stopped by Caden. "What do you want?" I had told him. "Happy birthday," Caden told me before handing me a wrapped present. I remember looking at the gift with a look of bit of disdain and suspicion on my face when he handed it to me. There were already a few things off about the whole thing to begin with. For one, my birthday wasn't for another 2 months. And secondly, it was completely out of the blue and very random. Although, knowing his personality, I knew for a fact that he was doing this because he wanted something from me. "Why are you giving this to me? You know my birthday isn't until June," I had told him. Wrong choice of words on my own end. He had taken great offense from my statement, apparently, despite the fact that it was 100% true, and then started to do his typical guilt tripping, followed up by him calling me various slurs, a whore, and how I was completely and utterly ungrateful to him. And lastly, on the guilt trip Sunday, going about how he was the only friend that took me in while nobody else would, and that there was nobody else like him, and that I should be grateful for what I have. I simply gave him a dead look the entire time. Then once he had finally stopped ranting at me and belittling me in front of everybody, He then calmed down enough to say one more sentence, which to this day makes my blood fucking boil. Well, even still, don't forget that my birthday is next week, and make sure to get me a good present for me. I spent weeks making your early birthday present. I expect the same thing, he said. I simply told him, sure. And then he went up to me and gave me a hug, which, in turn, I'm surprised I didn't puke all over the place because of how much I freaking hated this guy. When he finally let me alone, I basically turned to him one last time as he was walking out and flipped him off in the process. Although I knew for a fact that he'd start getting pissy about me not talking to him, and to just shut him up, I started talking with him again. And the whole cycle would only repeat again and again. Thankfully for me, after getting that DVD, I was finally able to rid myself of Caden for a good long while, and I do mean that. When I had gotten home that day, I took the little present out of my backpack and looked it over. It looked okay for the most part, although I definitely wasn't really impressed with the Christmas wrapping paper that he decided to wrap my little present in. Fucking cheap ass. I ripped the paper to shreds and found a box. A big black DVD box with nothing on it. I rolled my eyes a bit at that, and then opened up the casing, only to reveal a simple compact disc, with a printed-on cover for one on the DVD of a show that I absolutely adored by the name of Little Bear. My hopes lifted for a little bit before immediately crashing down like a waterfall. I didn't exactly trust this thing, especially given how I had remembered Caden talking about how he had supposedly spent weeks making the thing. For those of you who might want to know, Caden, despite the fact that he was a monster, was actually pretty talented when it came to drawing. Actually, that's a bit of an understatement. He was practically perfect when it came to drawing. Any kind of cartoon, anime, show, manga, anything like that you could come up with, he could draw it. And he would draw it like he was an animator for the show itself. Regardless of what it may seem to be, 2D, 3D, Blender, as long as you had a pencil, pad, or program, he could make it. He could draw it. He could do it. Which in retrospect only makes me even more pissed off over the fact that he has all of that talent, but will likely never use it, probably due to his narcissism. So you all should know about my suspicion at the moment about the DVD when I had first gotten it. I mean, sure, he was talented, but at the same time, I was a bit more freaked out over what he could have possibly done to this DVD or what he had made. Likely chances probably just to further fuck with my head and fuel his little sadist fetish. However, I knew that he would be asking me about it the next day, and would likely sit there and beat me again if I told them that I didn't watch it. So with a groan, I put the DVD into my laptop and then let the thing load. When it finally wound up popping up on Windows Media Player, I clicked play and the thing began. It only had one episode listed on it. His episode, for anybody wondering. The episode began with the typical intro for the show Little Bear, as all other episodes that started it up. Once the intro had finally ended, it then transitioned over to show the main title of the episode, which was entitled The Forest itself. Well, not itself, but just The Forest. And then it cut to the house of Little Bear before going to show Little Bear's mother tucking him into his bed and giving him a small kiss on his head. "Good night, Little Bear," Mother Bear said before making her way over towards the bedroom door. "Good night, Mother Bear," Little Bear answered back. Mother Bear then slowly closed the door to the bedroom door before the scene panned out to show Little Bear's lying comfortably in his bed, about to fall asleep in the process. However, just as he closed his eyes, a faint noise suddenly caught his attention, and being the young and adventurous bear that he was, made his way over towards the window to get a better listening to the sound. It was still rather faint, but it sounded like a beating of a pair of drums. Little Bear seemed rather intrigued and enticed by this. "I wonder what's going on out there," Little Bear said, placing his ear on the window to hear better. The sound was still muffled, but it certainly seemed that Little Bear was enjoying whatever music the drums were producing. Then, just as quickly as it started, the sound of the drums stopped abruptly. Little Bear seemed a little bit disappointed at this. "Aw, I wanted to hear more," Little Bear said, before making his way back over towards his bed. "Well, maybe I might hear it again soon. Although I wonder, what's going on out there? Maybe it was a party or something," Little Bear said as he made his way back over towards his bed, before jumping in and snuggling up into the covers. Whatever it was, it sounded really nice. Those were the last words that Little Bear said before yawning and falling asleep in his bed. The scene then transitioned over to show the outside of Little Bear's house, bright and early, with the sounds of chirping birds and the like adding a crisp feeling to the scene. The camera then cuts to show Little Bear at the table with his mother and father eating a bowl of porridge for his breakfast. "So, Little Bear, did you sleep well last night?" Father Bear asked. "I slept well, but I wish I could have listened to the drums a little bit longer," Little Bear answered. Both Father and Mother Bear looked rather intrigued at what Little Bear was saying, and Mother Bear didn't hesitate to ask him about it. "Little Bear, honey, what drums are you talking about?" Mother Bear asked. "The drums, you know, the ones that were playing last night in the forest," Little Bear responded. Mother Bear then looked rather confused, and soon made her way over towards the pot that contained the porridge, and then scooped herself up some into a bowl. "Well, that certainly is odd," Mother Bear said. "I didn't hear any drums last night. Are you sure that you weren't just dreaming it, Little Bear?" Little Bear simply nodded his head with a no to answer her question. Father Bear then looked over at Mother Bear for a bit with a rather odd look, before the sudden sound of the door knocking nearly made them both jump out of their seats. Little Bear saw this and then giggled a little bit at their reactions. Mother Bear then immediately got up from her seat and then made her way over towards where the front door was at and then opened it. The camera then cut to show Owl standing there on the mat. "Oh, well, good morning, and hello, Owl," Mother Bear said. "Hello to you as well, Mrs. Bear," Owl greeted, "and good morning, too. I was wondering if Little Bear would like to come out and play today." "Well, there's nothing really that needs to be done today, so sure, why not?" Mother Bear answered. Little Bear then finished up his porridge before making his way over towards the kitchen and placing his bowl and spoon into the sink. He then went over to his mother and then gave her a hug. "You two have fun now, and make sure to be home before sundown, Little Bear. I'm making fish stew for dinner tonight," Mother Bear said. "I'll make sure to be home, Mother Bear," Little Bear said before he and Owl raced off screen. The screen then transitioned back over to show Little Bear and Owl at the creek, simply enjoying the nice view of it. Then, after a moment, Little Bear then asked Owl a question. "Hey, Owl, did you happen to hear those drums last night?" "Actually, Little Bear, I did, but it was very faint," Owl answered back. "I wonder what was going on out there last night," Little Bear said, throwing a stone into the creek to make it tap. "Beats me, to be honest. Although, I think it might just be another one of those mystics having their little thing," Owl answered. This seemed to catch Little Bear's attention, as his eyes widened a bit with curiosity. He then made his way over towards Owl and then sat down next to him. "What mystics?" Little Bear asked curiously. Owl seemed a little surprised at the response that Little Bear was giving him, but answered anyway. "Well, Little Bear, from what I've read in a few books, the mystics are a group of animals in various species and sizes that gather around every few months at various parts of the woods to celebrate, or something," Owl answered. "What do they do at these meetups?" Little Bear asked. "The book I read didn't exactly specify what they do at these gatherings, but if you ask me, I think it's just a bunch of weird people attempting to try and read each other's minds or something," Owl said, chuckling a little bit at the joke that he had made. Little Bear didn't seem very satisfied at that answer, and then attempted to pry some more information from Owl, and what book that he was referring to. Owl simply pretty much said that there was nothing else more that he could really sit there and say or do at that point, because that was all the book that had said. Well, I guess I could ask Mother or Father Bear about this when I get home tonight, Little Bear answered. Owl and Little Bear then proceeded to play around a bit in the water before the scene faded to show the sun starting to set, and Little Bear making his way back home in the process. As he did so, the faint sound of the drums playing caused Little Bear to stop in his tracks. He looked rather mystified and looked like he was in a trance as the drums continued to sound. He then turned his head to focus in on the noise, practically in pure bliss as he listened to the beat of the drum. However, the drum sound stopped, and he quickly got out of his little trance, and then proceeded to make his way back home. Upon making his way back to the house, he was greeted by his mother finishing up supper. "Did you and Owl have a nice day today?" Mother Bear asked her son. "Mm-hmm. And guess what? I heard the drums again," Little Bear announced. "Oh, well that's good. Did they sound nice?" Little Bear asked. "They certainly did," Little Bear answered. The scene then transitioned once again to show Little Bear in his bed at night. He was just about to drift off to sleep, but then the sound came up again. This time, a lot louder. Little Bear, instead of making his way to the window, suddenly got out of bed in the same trance-like state, and then opened up his bedroom window and began walking towards where the sound was at. I, at this point, was a bit unnerved at what was going on. I mean, sure, the episode so far was normal, but I guess I kinda let my guard down a bit at the time because of that. Honestly, I was in for something really messed up. Once Little Bear had entered into the forest, and deep into it, mind you, was when Little Bear finally came to his senses once the drumming stopped. He shook his head rapidly before looking around him where he was at, confused. Where am I?" Little Bear said, rather frightened. He then turned around to try and make his way back home, but as soon as he did that, someone immediately grabbed onto him violently and began to drag Little Bear deeper and deeper into the woods. Little Bear started to struggle at the person's grip, but was unable to get himself free due to the strong hold the person had on his arms. Little Bear then started to cry before yelling out his mother and father's names before a single apple was jammed into his muzzle, silencing his screams. The scene then cut to show a group of people dressed in white capes and masks, all standing around a large fire pit with a stone structure a few feet away from it. They did nothing at first before finally turning their heads when they heard the muffled screams of Little Bear. One of the robed figures immediately began to beat at the pair of drums once again in a soft rhythm. This in turn caused Little Bear's struggles to immediately stop, as he soon went limp and his eyes gave off the thousand-mile stare. The masked figure had then taken Little Bear and immediately lifted the young cub onto the makeshift stone structure and began to, smudge it with a bushel of sage. It's then that I noticed that the figures themselves were just as Owl had described in his book, minus the mask. I could tell because the paws and the claws that each of them had were visible. The scene then panned over towards one of the members of this messed up group, who then took the bundle of sage from the person who was cleansing the structure, as well as Little Bear, before handing him a small dagger. The person then grabbed at the dagger and then raised it up high, before immediately plunging it down into Little Bear's chest, the sound of the drums getting faster and faster as it plunged deeper and deeper into Little Bear. Little Bear didn't even really react. A soft flow of cartoony blood began to pour down from the punctured wound, where Little Bear's eyes rolled in the back of his head, and his entire body went limp. After viewing that scene, I didn't waste any time. I quickly paused the damn thing and then took it out of my computer, before trying to calm myself down. What in the honest hell did I just watch? I mean, yeah, what was that? The fact that this episode went from practically 1 to 100 in the span of less than 11 minutes was something that, although I should have expected, was something that I wasn't expecting. For anybody asking, no, I didn't watch the rest of the episode, and I have no intention of finishing it. I've been fucked up enough to sit there and watch that animation of Little Bear getting practically sacrificed, being created by that fucking narcissist. There is no way in hell that I'm going to give Caden the satisfaction of viewing the whole thing. Needless to say, that fucked my head up for a good portion of the night. And the next morning, I took the disc and box that it came in, and then wind up taking it back to school with me the next day. It's then, when Caden finally came up to me asking about it, that I'd finally snapped. And not only did I make my thoughts very clear to Caden about how much of a sick monster he was and how much I hated him, but decided to lay on some sweet justice for the abuse and mental and physical that he had given me, and proceeded to beat the ever-living crap out of him before he could even remotely say anything to try and guilt-trip me. The last thing that I ultimately did was take that disc and crack it over his head with my shoe. Yes, I did get expelled. Yes, I got in trouble. But you know what? It was all worth it. It was all worth it to finally tell that bastard to screw off. And doing it in that manner as well. Probably one of the best ways that I've honestly felt satisfied. I can certainly say that. As for me now, I'm doing alright. I'm still screwed up because of my social disorders, but I'm still ultimately trying to make it through each and every day. It feels good to sit there and talk about this though. Even if the episode itself may not have made a whole lot of sense, it's still relatively interesting. I can certainly say that for an absolute fact.
In fear and surprise as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.